Is this thing on? Hello,
I
Internet.
think so.
Greetings. Very good to be here. I'm going to send a tweet to let people know that we are currently live talking about conflict skills with Jeff.
Joff.
Post. Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad to be corrected. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rich. Welcome to my channel. I'm just meeting Joff for the first time. This is why I'm saying his name incorrectly. And Jeff and I have got a bunch of friends in common, and we're both running a conflict training workshop soon. Each of us are operating different conflict workshops, and we thought it would be interesting to get to know each other and bring some curiosity to why do you care about conflict, and what does your workshop look like, and how is it different from my workshop, and what are our distinctive strengths and interests, and just to understand a bit more about each other, because I think we both share a sense that this stuff is really important. And it would be nice to just, know more people that are allies out there in the world, trying to deploy more conflict skills in the world. Do you want to tell us a little, how does this fit in your life story? Like, how does someone become a conflict trainer?
I don't think I know how someone becomes a conflict trainer, Rich, but I can tell a little bit about what led me here. I think it starts with, if we want to go all the way back, I had a very conflict-heavy household as a child. My parents fought a lot. My friends' parents fought a lot. And as I grew up, the same attitude toward conflict was kind of engendered in me, which is there are two modes, basically. There's fawn and there's fight. And as a teenager, I chose fight more often than anything else, which led me to some pretty nasty places, including hospitals and jails. And as I got a hold of myself in my late teenage years, I started attending a fight academy. And one of the rules at Fight Academy, not the rules of Fight Club, but the rules of Fight Academy, was that if you were ever in a fight outside of the gym, you weren't allowed to come back. And I think that, coupled with meditation, learning that there's so much optionality that can be had in martial aggression conflict and situations, taught me a lot about the optionality that we can have in difficult conversations as well. That there is more than two modes, and there's more than one way to approach a conflict in a fight. And I think that the jujitsu that I practiced then led me to study the Aikido, or the thing that I think about as the Aikido of difficult conversations later in life. I ended up training as a mediator, retraining as a mediator. I've spent a lot of my life in positions of negotiation, whether they're sales or running teams of 300 plus people. And I think that one of the fulcrums of my success in any of those situations and my success in the community has always been how I handle it. And I recognize that as I've done a lot of communication training over the last decade of my life, and then started giving communication training, one of the most, I'll call it malnourished or anemic parts of communication training is conflict. We tend to gloss over it, or we go straight to the decision making, as opposed to focusing on the conflict itself and what we can mine from it. And I mean, I could cite research all day on why it is so important that we spend more time focusing on and training ourselves for positive outcomes from conflict. But I looked out across the landscape and thought, there are trainings on mediation, there are trainings on negotiation, there are trainings on marital conflict. There are no trainings that are specifically on how do I have difficult conversations. And that drove me to create the course that we've created. We were originally invited to Wisdom. If you or anyone else knows Rebel Wisdom, the sense-making organization that is no longer Rebel Wisdom, we were invited by them to create a course. And what we did, we tried to wrap together all the edges of those different approaches to conflict in one place. And over the last 6 years, I've just found that to be some of the most important work in my professional life.
Could you say anything about what difference it makes? Like, I mean, assuming I take you at your word that you've got a degree of competence and skill and confidence with your when you go into conflict, like you're someone that's willing to take on these difficult conversations, like what difference does that make to a group?
To a group that I'm in leadership of, to a relationship that I'm inside of. Yes.
I'm just trying to know, like, how does it feel when you're good at this?
I'm not sure anyone has ever asked for. I think in a position of leadership, there's, again, I come back to this term of optionality. There's a sense of calm and receptiveness and responsiveness that I tend to feel when I'm witnessing a group conflict, like inside of a group that I'm facilitating for. So talking at the meta level, like I'm responsible to this group of human beings for helping them human better together. When I'm inside of a conflict, it's almost a series of mantras and like trigger action patterns that I've returned to. Just like, oh, I noticed this rising, or oh, I noticed this denial, or oh, I noticed this is activating me for a reason or another. Here's the thing that I do because I've trained myself to do that. And I guess if it was something like, it would be that. It would be a witness sense of having more optionality. And that encourages, I guess, like a sense of calm or control, or a sense of okayness with the chaos. In the moment, I think that's how it shows up for me. I love that question.
I feel it like I love what you're saying about optionality and having, like, extending the space between the stimulus and the response, and that when you're in a tense situation, maybe with multiple interacting parties that are stressed with each other and like dialing up the tension, you kind of watch people switch off or become intoxicated or like lose some of their presence, lose some of their faculties as different parts of their brain start shutting off. And to be the sober one that's able to stay present and just observe what's happening and still feel like you've got options. I feel like it's like in the Matrix, with the bullet time. It's like, I've got options where everyone else is pinned in place, but we can move things around.
It can feel a little bit like the allegory sometimes, and that's the place where it can feel frustrating from a facilitation or leadership perspective, I think. It's like you see these people yelling at each other over and over again, and it's finding the way to recall their attention to the point that like the thing that they're frustrated with isn't the person in the chair, it's the thing over there that we should be talking about together. Like, readdressing the problem or the concern. In negotiation, it's the difference between position and interest-based bargaining or negotiation. And when we can't get that, sometimes I will admit, for me, it can be very frustrating. I'm like, guys, you are fighting shadows here. What are we doing? I invite everyone to take a breath. For the love of all that is holy. I notice myself as I'm speaking on, and you're fantastic at pulling it out of me, Rich, that I don't really know what has driven you to the passion of working with conflict. And I'd love to know a little bit about your story and how we ended up here.
I say on our website, I got my PhD in disagreeability when I was excommunicated from my family church. Which is maybe a kind of obscure reference, but it means that I was raised in a fundamentalist religion, and at a certain point, I decided, like, even though everyone that I know believes this, I don't believe it, and I'm gonna have to stick up for what I believe in, and have this like quite substantial rupture with my family, with my extended community, and it's obviously very painful and left a lot of bruises on me, but also has left me with the sense of, I guess people call it sovereignty. Like I'm pretty unfuckwithable. Like I feel like I put up a lot of resistance against a very comprehensive campaign of like a coercive ideology, and said, no, it's not how I think. It's not what's happening. And so that's just been a part of my character ever since I was a teenager, is this like pretty strong disagreeability. Like I'm one of these people that has strong boundaries and as I've grown up and hopefully softened a little bit, the learning for me has more been about how to maintain a connection with someone while being boundaried. Like it's easy for me to have a boundary when I just sort of, my friend calls it switching someone off in your mind. Like you can kind of just make that person, they don't exist anymore. Like poof. But to hold the fullness of this person and also to say, no, I'm not up for that. That's a whole new skill for me. So yeah, there's something in my character about disagreeability and being assertive and having boundaries, which I think is distinctive compared to a lot of my peers. So it seems like we're in a subculture that is really yin, very gentle, very tender, very understanding, sort of leans towards the fawning more than the fighting. And then specifically in like a career trajectory, I got obsessed with non-hierarchical organizations. Like how do you get a group of people together and be effective and productive and aligned without one person being in charge? And I would say develop a certain degree of expertise in that field. And conflict is kind of the last piece of the system to get decentralized. That we can have a system for everyone has a vote on the budget, or we run collaborative decision making about our strategy or whatever. But when it comes to our relationship is breaking down, I don't trust you anymore. You've really hurt me, and I've lost that sense of connection with you. What we found with our work with decentralized organizations is that people always want to go to the leader. They want to go to mum or dad to help solve the conflict that they're in. And the prerequisite to being an effective collaborator is to be able to solve your own problems, win your own fights, listen to the other person, be the adult in the room, and not call on some external third party. And so I just saw it as a linchpin, I guess, as a leverage point that if I want to be working with sophisticated collaborators, they're going to have to know how to say no. No, thank you. And I think it was kind of pulled out of me. Like a lot of the work I've done, it's been people have asked me, hey, can you share about this? Or there's this kind of interest, like you seem different to us, Rich. Can you share something about how you're doing that? In my leadership roles, like I'm running a retreat center, so we're often having events here, often having new groups, and we're trying to create a context of exceptional safety and like emotional fluency and closeness. That safety is maintained by having some degree of fierceness available about how we patrol the edges and say that ain't happening yet. That's not on. So like having someone in the room that can just, in that grounded, mature, straightforward way say, no, you're not doing that. And that to be able to access that posture of like inarguable self-determination really helps create a field of safety that then lots of other stuff can happen inside of that container, but it's a kind of like necessary force. And then my collaborator, so the course we're doing is called Fightwise, and I'm collaborating with Vivid Void, and he's an ex-Marine, so he also brings a lot of that like this stiff, determined, and he's a deep meditator, very far down the Zen tradition. So he's softened up as well. But yeah, we've got that. I think there's a certain protectiveness. It's really, for me, it's very sweet. It's treasure to be able to protect other people, and then with these kind of trainings to equip people to protect themselves.
That's a journey. Thank you for sharing. It's good to be here with you. There are so many points that you brought up that I wanted to be like, but I want to ask you about this. I have the sense that we could probably have a number of conversations because there's so much overlap in what we and I think I'm just kind of realizing that more of the fullness of your story is really wonderful to me. One of the things that you said toward the end felt particularly relevant. There's this phrase that like, I think gentleness and harmlessness are often confused. To be gentle, one must have the capacity for violence. If you don't have the capacity for violence, you're simply harmless. And to help a container or make a container safe, to reinforce that safety, there has to be a capacity for the enforcement of the boundaries. And so when you're talking about working actively with a Marine and putting together this course and bringing a fierceness to bringing safety to a community, there's a lot that I respect in that approach. I think a question that I have kind of out the gate as we're starting to talk about conflicts, Fight-Wise and The Art of Difficult Conversations are inherently different for a lot of different reasons. But I imagine there are some places that we could have interesting discussion. The first places that I think is if you could engender in the world, if you could teach the entire world only one conflict skill, what would it be?
This is so tough. I'm trying to be clever, but I think if I have to teach everyone, I have to be simple. So I think it would be. I think it would be about the skill of recognizing your own nervous system arousal and finding the sweet spot. And for me, the sweet spot is I have been agitated and disturbed, and I'm no longer comfortable, and I'm feeling the charge. And everyone has their own somatic fingerprint. Everyone's going to feel that charge in a different way, like tingles in the back of my hand, or like hair standing up on end, or heart racing, whatever. There's lots of different ways this can happen. But there's a moment somewhere early on in the phase of activation that says something important is at stake to me, and it's at threat. And you've got a choice then to protect it. And a lot of the people that we're working with, they have learned to mistrust that signal or to fear, like, oh, if I were to speak from that place or to act from that place, I'm going to do a whole lot of harm, so I can't do that. And instead, I'm going to switch to this fawning mode, or I'm going to avoid the situation altogether, or I'm just going to de-escalate as quickly as I can. And in the process, abandon themselves, give up on their principles, give up on what they really care about, and constantly find themselves in these like really unsatisfying, compromised positions. But if you can find that spot where you're activated, but you haven't yet got so activated that your brain is starting to shut down and you're losing your higher functions, that is the sweet spot to be able to deliver some real truth. For me, it's like I'm slightly out of control. Like I have just begun to lose my composure. I'm just starting. I'm starting to speak faster than I can think. That's when I know I'm in the sweet spot, when stuff is just starting to come. But if I think of it as a 10-point scale, for me, that's like somewhere between 5 and 6. But as soon as I get to 7, I'm already throwing insults and saying things that I regret and making a mess, and then I'm going to have to make repairs afterwards. So there's a real calibration of learning to act from that spot, to recognize this is anger, this is defensiveness, this is protectiveness, and I'm going to move with it, and act with precision. I call it vibe hygiene, like be hygienic with my delivery. Yeah, I think if people knew how to do that it was safe to do that actually their relationships improve when they can access that fiery presence, and they know they've got an accelerator, but they've also got the brakes. They know how to like tap down. Come on, we don't need to completely lose control, but just to be in that spirit of aliveness where the real stuff is coming out, not my managed persona, but the real stuff is coming out. I think that's mostly about awareness. It's mostly about tracking somatically what's going on for me, and a little bit of practice and having frameworks about, what's a good way to structure my negotiation or my position. But mostly it's about expanding my awareness around the tough situation I'm having and finding that resourcefulness and that ability to make choices. Judging from the expression on your face, I wonder if we had a snap there, if you were thinking the same thing.
It's close. Yeah, it's close. Engage with it is definitely different than the way that I engage with it, which is nice. And before we went live, we were talking, I think, about riding the edge of a wave in our lives. And I think it sounds like both of us design our lives in such a way that we have a philosophy that riding the edge of human productivity or human capacity, like living into the outside edge of your potential, is the way to be most productive and most fully alive in the world. And so it doesn't feel like a significant surprise that we would bring that philosophy into the way that we approach conflict too. It's like find the edge of your potential or your capacity wherein you're still in control, and then live into that aliveness. I think, like, to answer on the flip side of the response that it's like the question that it seems like you're asking, if I could teach only one, it would be emotional regulation. One. Like if I could just teach one, it would be emotional regulation. If I wanted to secondarily go like, okay, about there teaching emotional regulation, people can go learn emotional regulation from Rich. He's got that. I think the second thing would be same team mentality, right? Teaching, most of the time when we enter into conflict, people have a poor threat recognition system, right? We do a very bad job at positively identifying the thing that's the actual threat in a situation. And when we're in conflict with another person or another group of people, we often pull like an internal ad hominem, right? It's a false attribution bias that we have, where if somebody is on the opposite side of a position from us, like they believe something different or they want something different, then inherently we assign that to a bad character. Like they have bad morals, they have bad character. And if it's us in that same position, we tend to define it, again, false attribution bias, to environmental circumstances. The same way that if we watch someone across the room succeeding at something hard, well, they insert environmental circumstances here, like they had the opportunity to take risk. And however, if they're failing, it's because, well, they just are inherently a lazy person, right? This is just something that we do as human beings, and it's an ego protection mechanism. So I think that many times I watch this thing happen over and over again, where two people are fighting each other, but it's actually pretty rare that two people are fighting each other. It is most common that two people or two groups of people are fighting something else. It's a problem, it's an ideal, it's a resource scarcity, it's a difference of opinion, it's differently interpreted morals. And I tend to try to instill this philosophy in the people that I work with, that if you're in conversation with someone, if you're still in conversation with someone, if you're deciding to continue to be in conversation with someone, then you're working together. It doesn't matter how much they look like your enemy, this is still a collaborative effort. Until you walk away from the table, that this becomes something. Even if you were in a physical altercation with somebody, and again, this comes back to fight training. If you're in a physical altercation with somebody, you're in a martial dance, right? It is a collaborative endeavor. And I think when people can effectively switch the way that they're thinking about arguing with the person that's in front of you at the table with you into sitting at the table with this other person and arguing about the thing that's over there. So we're sitting here on the same side of the table together. It absolutely transforms the way that most people engage with conflict. And there are a number of mechanisms that I have for doing this thing to make it as simple as possible. But the easiest thing that I have to say about it is like instilling this sense of same team mentality, reminding people like ad hominem, like arguing at somebody ad hominem is never going to change who they are. Attacking them as a person is never going to change their mind about the thing that you care about or convince them that it's a good idea to collaborate with you on this thing that you both care about. In fact, most likely it's going to alienate them and dehumanize yourself.
I love this phrase, same team mentality. There have been literal fights I've had with my wife where we've been sitting across the table from each other and kind of bickering or like, and I'll get up and switch seats so we're sitting next to each other. And just that move of being shoulder to shoulder, looking outwards instead of face to face with this, it's kind of intimidating to have someone's eyeballs up in your face sometimes. I've felt that open up more space for our, like what we're capable of, or it can de-escalate the intensity of like allow for a little. Maybe I can be a little more contemplative and have a couple of breaths before I say what I need to say. Kind of it de-accelerates things. It slows down the sparring.
Have you ever seen the movie Anchorman? There's this scene where one of the characters is like they're in this room and they're all yelling back and forth, and one of the characters who's very obviously on the spectrum just goes, "I don't know what we're yelling about," and he's just yelling because everybody is yelling. At some point, I'll look at I'll stop myself in a conversation like, "What are we yelling at?" And I was working with this couple a couple of weeks ago, and I gave them one phrase to use, which is like, I want you, when you find yourselves in that situation again, I want one of you to join the other person and yell, "Who are we fighting?" Because oftentimes that's it. You're fighting past circumstance. You're fighting a poor interpretation. You're fighting a shadow of something, and often you don't know in the moment if it's a projection or what it is. If you can get curious about the root of the pattern instead of the individual instance. I'm talking specifically about relational conflict now because you brought up your relationship with your wife.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, like, how do you? People's conflict patterns are really baked in from early childhood experiences and like their outlook on the world and what they think of themselves and everything. So I'm wondering how your course equips people to go through that process of change, because in my perspective, just giving people some frameworks doesn't really scratch the surface. So like, what kind of stuff do you do that actually makes a difference, that actually leaves a lasting impact?
Well, Rich, I think you'd have to ask my students. But having asked my students, again, I like little micro quotes. One of them is, we don't level our expectations, we follow the level of the level of our training or the level of our systems. You don't get better at a thing without practicing it. You certainly don't replace patterns without habituating the things that are going to replace them. So the Art of Difficult Conversations course is 3 hours. Each session is 3 hours long. It is 8 weeks long. We spend an entire day together as a cohort. And of that day, 80% of that time is spent in practice. I've run this course now for almost 5 years, and the thing that I always put front and center is frameworks need to be simple. Like, it's important to have a knowledge of why these simple frameworks work, but the frameworks themselves have to be very simple for people to access them when they're in heightened states of arousal. Ideally, right, if we're targeting this tiny little zone of tolerance in which we have the highest level of productivity and operating capacity, and they have to be applicable, they have to be practicable, they have to be trainable. And so during this run of the course, I have built us the opportunity to spend almost all of our time in practice and not on theory, by building out the entire back end of our course as an on-demand evergreen content. So we don't do didactic learning in class anymore. We'll do a little overview of the topics that have been presented, and then the rest of the time is spent in active practice and drilling. Something that we get comfortable with early on, and we haven't talked about identity triggers yet, but we both, I think, utilize this idea of identity triggers. There are 3 types of significant triggers: identity triggers, circumstantial triggers, and environmental triggers. And so we work with people to identify those triggers, and we use those as leverage points for pushing us into heightened states of arousal. Another thing that I'll do in in-person labs is breathing exercises to push up our CO2 levels and mimic states of arousal, kind of like the edge of shock. Training in the conditions that you're going to operate in, I think, is the only way that we do this. And training for success. So in the beginning, again, one of the things that we do with creating and really instilling this model of same team mentality inside of conflict is, if you're in a same team conflict, your win condition changes. It isn't your position anymore. It's a successful agreement. That is a lot easier to satisfy than a position. So like, if I go in, take the most like zero-sum argument ever, right? I'm going in to buy a car. If I go in with the position that I'm going to buy this car for $34,000 and its current like target value is $40,000, and I end at 36, I failed, right? If instead I'm going to work together with this salesperson to make sure that we both get taken care of, and I'm making sure that I have my car's made, all of those things taken care of for the next 100,000 miles without going into debt and building a positive relationship with my dealer. Well, then if I walk out of there at $36,000 and I have a maintenance plan and I know the dude in service and I know the head of sales and my sales guy really likes me, well, I'm going to have that car for the next 7 or 8 years, Rich. That is a much larger success, and it's a much easier win condition. So to rewire habits, we have to have successful coded interactions and memories of that thing succeeding. Yeah. And so through practice and through changing our win conditions, we can code people to stop avoiding conflict and stop disengaging too early and stop continuing to engage when it's no longer productive. And I think inherently those are the approaches that we use, right? Training the conditions and changing the win conditions.
It's so funny how much overlap there is between what you're saying. Like I could have said all of those words. We, on the win condition front, we have extremely gradual learning slope to meet people wherever they are, because obviously people are showing up at really different states. Probably the smallest win condition is I still made a mess of the situation. I didn't communicate clearly, but I had more awareness about what was happening. I went to my journal afterwards, and instead of dissociating and zombie scrolling and, trying to put that ugly feeling away, I sat down for half an hour with my journal and I said, what triggered me? How intense was it? Where did I notice that in my body? What stories came up? What did I wish I had done? What am I going to try and do next time? Like that's already a win compared to just making a mess and then dissociating.
So you're using CBT journals too.
Yeah. We call it trigger log. I stole that name from someone else, from Samantha Slade from Going Horizontal. She's great. And then the next one condition is I defended my integrity. I communicated clearly. I asked for what I wanted. I got my point across. I was heard. And that, again, it's like just get in the habit of saying your piece and being heard, let alone what actually happens at the end of the negotiation. Like that already is like a step up for a lot of people. And then, then we start to get to these other wins that you're describing of like, we came to an agreement that was good enough for both of us. That's that, like, we're trying to help people calibrate what level of skill are they at and what's a win that they can take today, and how does that accumulate, or these micro practices accumulate into bigger and bigger wins. We often talk about the final boss. Like the final boss level of conflict is, for most people, it's like going home to your family. Like you might have your cool countercultural, like, I don't know, at your burn or this little community you're part of where everyone's been doing a lot of communication training and they're all into authentic relating or whatever the nonviolent communication, whatever the things that they're into. But going home to the family where you're so tempted to just inhabit the roles that you've had since you were born, like so much more difficult. So like giving people guidance in how to pick what's a winnable fight, like maybe resolving this dynamic with your mother that's been present for 40 years is pretty extreme, but telling the taxi driver that you don't want the air conditioning on is, like a really low stakes fight that maybe you can win today, and you can build those wins up one at a time. I was going to say, I wanted to point out one of the things that is really distinctive, I think, about our courses currently. The next course that we're running, the FightWise course, is the Family Holiday Edition. Like I said about going home to the family, this is the one where the whole point of the course is we're going to look at your family relationships. We're going to understand like which are the difficult ones, which are the family relationships where you feel like you've actually got some possibility of shifting the dynamic. Ones where you can expect to get some kind of positive results from showing up in a different way. We're thinking about, going home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever holiday people are going home for, and having that conversation with Uncle Bob or Auntie, whatever, that's like right on the brink of exploding and kind of ruining everyone's happy meal. And identifying and practicing and rehearsing and saying like, where can I make an intervention and shift that dynamic and make a contribution at a minimum, let's just have a nice meal. You know, like can we avoid things blowing up? But at a maximum, can we shift the dynamics in our family and start relating to each other in a different way? And yeah, I'm really excited about it in a very selfish way. And I've got my own family dynamics, which I hinted at the start. And for my own story, like making the kind of wins that I can expect from this is like they're pretty small. You know, it's like gaining a little atom or a little microgram of more autonomy, more sovereignty as I'm interacting with my parents. Like that's a win, and I'm like trying to accumulate these bigger and bigger wins. So yeah, this is a new chapter for us. We've been doing Fightwise for a couple of years. I think this is our 10th iteration on the program. This is the first time doing the Family Holiday Edition, which just brings like a whole extra degree of spiciness.
Definitely. We tend to run ADC every fall, and our fall course is just the family edition. It's what we attract every year. So most of the people that end up in our core fall courses, like that just becomes the center point of all of our active discussions and all of our example situations. And I really relish that. I'm not the lead coach on it this time. I'm the course designer. I'm stepping away from the lead coach role, that feels really weird, Rich. It feels really weird to be doing that. It's kind of scary, but I'm also really excited because Laura, who you actually know, is stepping into the position as our lead coach, and I feel super excited for her to lead a cohort. It's a wonderful feeling watching people change inside of it. But you're right. Like the place that it's hardest to use these new skills is always the places that you have patterned response. And it's not just your response, it's the expectation, right? People are treating you as though you're going to respond a certain way. And then it makes responding in a different way significantly more frictious because it creates cognitive for them. Like this isn't the model that this isn't how they respond. What's going on here? And then they get indignant about it because you're breaking their model of you. It's
yeah, I have a friend who this has really stuck with me ever since he said it. He was explaining the drama triangle, and he said the way the drama triangle works is somebody decides to jump into one of those three roles. You know, what is it? The aggressor, the victim, and the savior. And as they step into their role, they nudge the other two parties and hand them the script and say, you know, now it's your turn. Get on stage with me. It's this complex dynamic. Again, this is why we need to be practicing, right? Like this is a lot of the practice that we do will set people up to explicitly, okay, you're going to be the protagonist, you're going to be the antagonist. Your job is to, you know, they put people into those characters so they're as if they're acting out scenes.
Do you use a lot of role playing?
Yeah, that's a big part of the practice will be role play, and it's sort of we'll start with role play as in you know, invented scenarios, pretty low stakes scenarios, and then gradually the scenarios come closer to home, and then we start revisiting real scenarios, real experiences you've had from the past, and then we get into anticipating the future. And like, yeah, we get people to think about gets very specific about what are some relationships that would really benefit from you showing up with more courage. What's the fight you need to have? How are you going to prep for it? We're going to rehearse it a couple of times with a surrogate. So it's like gradually just turning the heat up on people.
I think it's lovely that that's kind of a hologram of the way that you've set out some of the materials that you've sent to me, right? When we talk about emotional flooding, like what happens when emotional flooding occurs, right? And so if we just step through that, what happens is we receive an external stimuli. That stimuli stimulates a memory in the hippocampus. The hippocampus talks to the amygdala. The amygdala turns on the alarm system, sends messages to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus sends all the hormones through our system by activating the limbic system. We're stuck in a moment in the past, in the present. And the work that we have is to make it back to the present first, right? So we name the emotion, we recognize what we're feeling, we start to re-engage the prefrontal cortex and calm down the limbic system by reactivating the autonomic nervous system, disengaging the sympathetic nervous system. And we do that so that we can do the thing that you're talking about, right? Which is talk about the future. Once we can think about the future again, we know that we're back in our prefrontal cortex, because future modeling can't happen without the engagement of the prefrontal cortex. So if you can get curious about a person, if you can express empathy, or you can model for the future, you're in the future. So this idea that like when you're doing these role plays, you start in the past, you move to the present, and then you engage with the future. It's just kind of, it was an interesting hologram of the way that you set up. your systems and model them around emotional flooding and amygdala hijack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to be present to be able to think about the future, right? Like that's what flooding is. It's like losing presence. Like like I said, the light switch goes off. You're not there anymore. You're kind of an automaton that's rehearsing a script that you've run through 100 times already. And what I was saying about finding that calibration of your own nervous system arousal, it's about being present. It's about having more expanded awareness, like more capability of noticing things, and in that expanded bubble of awareness, having more choices.
Something that
and more
you talked about
cognitive function
was this tiny little range, which is, I think, what you're calling your I don't think you actually gave it a label, but I'm thinking of it as your zone of tolerance, like your optimal operating zone. You call it a 5 or a 6, right? But at 7, bad things happen.
Yeah.
And at 1, you don't care enough to try, right? That's apathy. So I'm wondering if you've in your work and through both teaching and as a practitioner found ways of reliably increasing that range of activation. Actually have something more like your obvious range and your desirable range is something like a 3 to 6.
Yeah.
Bring your 5 and your 6 back down into like 3 and 4 zones so that you have more of a pad or a cushion before that emotional flooding or hijacking or sympathetic nervous system activation happens.
Yeah, definitely. This is a big part of the game, is getting people to recognize at 3. Because the people we're working with have habitually trained themselves that, you just ignore those things. You just sweep them under the rug. It's like, oh yes, I'm frustrated, but I won't admit that to myself that I'm frustrated, because I'm a good person. I get along well with others. I'll just go along with what's happening.
Identity trigger.
Yeah, exactly. And we want people to be able to, we've got this exercise which I find very amusing, where you get people to write down, like we introduce the scale from 1 to 10 and then give some more specific guidance about how you can distinguish each step on the scale. And then we say, write down something that someone could say to you that would trigger you to a 3. And what's something I could say to you that would trigger you to a 4 and to a 5? And you're sort of coming up with these statements. And then we get them to say those statements to each other. And they always go in thinking like, oh, this is just an exercise. It's no big deal. But actually, they find themselves like, whoa, it's real. Like hearing these things, it actually genuinely activates the same system. It is pretty reliable. It's like pressing a button on the dashboard. And a lot of what we're doing is getting people to start changing their orientation as soon as they feel that 3, as soon as they feel that first little glimmer that there's something at stake, that there's some kind of threat, then they should be moving, should be adjusting their position and getting ready for a different engagement with people, giving people early opportunities to change direction. What I was saying about the sweet spot, I think that's for when it really gets, how do I describe it? When it's gotten to that point of high stakes, where something's got to give, there to me is a sweet spot where I actually do want to be in my anger. Like I really do want to feel the blood coursing through my veins. I don't want to be completely calm and like a robot. That feels like a kind of dishonesty to work from that place with the big stuff. I'm looking for the like passion, aliveness.
Yeah, we do it again. Just another one of these, like, it feels so weird to have somebody else in the world. It's like, hey, this is this exercise that I do that we came up with. And I'm like, yeah, we do the exact same thing. Literally we do the exact same thing. And I've actually found people have a really hard time doing that. They have a really hard time figuring out, like, what is something that triggers me? Again, going back to another identity trigger, and this is one of the triggers talk about, right? I'm a good person, regulated. It's environmental circumstances that dysregulate me. I get dysregulated because somebody else is wrong. Like, no, you don't. Here, let me give you an example. What's something you judge harshly about someone else in the world? What's the last thing that pissed you off about somebody at the supermarket? On a phone call? What's the last thing that pissed you off in your relationship with your wife, your husband, whoever? Great. Now I want you, tell me what it is. Now I'm just going to throw it back at you. How does that feel? You know why that is? It's because you have a value around that thing, and you're judging other people as a projection of a value that you hold, and you predicate your life on the existence that you don't do that you're not that person. And so when that thing gets challenged, we're rubbing up against a personal identity trigger. It's a value you hold, and it is important to your sense of self to hold it. And when that sense of self is put under threat, it's the exact same thing as an existential threat, because it is. It is a maybe not your physical life, but your persistence as a person. You have a vision of who you are in this world, and your entire life is predicated on that vision of who you are. And so when it comes under threat, it's an existential threat to your reality. And your system is going to treat it the same way, as though it was a tiger in the bush. And so we need to know what those things are. And if you're going to be prepared for these types of engagements and be a better conflict partner to your friends and your collaborators in your life, this is work you need to do.
Yeah, and in doing that, you build out a better taxonomy of yourself. It's like, oh, these are the things that are really important to me, and I can just let people know that ahead of time when we're going into a collaboration. Like,
here's my operating manual.
Yeah. If you want to see me blow steam out of my ears, these are the ways to upset me.
And now that you have that manual, if you do those things, I know that you're trying to watch me blow steam out of me. Yeah. You're talking about this other thing. Sorry, I'm losing myself because there's so much here that I'm enjoying. You were talking about showing up with real emotion or emotionality, letting yourself be affected in a conversation. And you earlier talked about the community of communicators and self-help gurus and your burn buddies that all talk kind of the same way. And when we're in a conflict, we kind of default to this voice that's almost like a facilitator or a therapist voice. And it is the most infuriating thing that I could possibly be confronted with when I'm taking a conversation seriously, to have somebody else talk at me like this the whole time, when I just want to see them emotionally affected, Rich. To like yourself be affected, having emotion. It's I've found that it's really important. Like when you have somebody who is getting louder and louder and more aggressive. One of the many things that I've done in my life is I ran bars and nightclubs. I did that for a couple of years. It was horrible. I'm still recovering my sleep patterns. But a huge benefit of working in the bar industry is you get to see a lot of people in dysregulated states doing really stupid things. One of the most common of which is fighting each other. Various levels of escalation. But a common thing that you would see is one person, like, I live in Austin, Texas. We have a big culture of, it's okay, it's fine, calm the bear. And the bear on the other side is just getting more and more angry because what they want is to feel seen. They want to feel heard. Well, they want to feel like they're having some kind of effect. And so oftentimes, like being like, you look really pissed out. You are so angry. Making no sense at all about what they're talking about. Just meeting them in that level of like, affect, that level of affect is all they need to be like, yeah, man, I fucking am. Like, great, let's go where there aren't bystanders for a second. Yeah, how about that? Like, good slap on the back. Oftentimes aggressors and people that are feeling shame or feeling sadness, that therapist voice doesn't communicate any level of true empathy. There is no affect. You're communicating like, yeah, no matter what you say right now, I'm going to be the same at the end of this conversation. That doesn't communicate any investment.
Yeah, I think this is a cultural moment, right? I think the moment has peaked actually, where we got really, and mostly appropriately, we got really concerned about offending each other. People really wanted to be more considerate, but in so doing, in this concern about causing offense or hurting people's feelings, the price is a kind of lack of aliveness. Like that therapist voice you're describing, it sounds like an AI, right? Like it sounds like a robot. You can't feel any humanity behind it. And part of the reason that we got started with this course in the first place was, people coming to us saying, we can feel this excessive gentleness, this lack of backbone. And we know it's not how we want to be, but we don't really have good models of like what's an appropriate use of aggression. And yeah, it's been so gratifying to just like turn up the heat a little bit in a lot of my friendships and a lot of my communities now, that people are just more able to say, this is fucked, I'm not standing for it. And it doesn't have to be a huge dramatic process, but just like clarity, that cold steel of clarity. Yeah, it's really delicious. I'm getting keen to wrap it up. I've got another meeting that I want to get to. I think it would be useful for us to just double click on any practical information that we want to make sure people have got in their heads before we have any last words. I think you started sketching out the shape of the course, 8 weeks, I think. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the practical logistics?
Yeah. So the Art of Difficult Conversations is starting the 22nd of October. We run 8 sessions. Each one of those sessions is 3 hours long. We're not going to make any skips or breaks through the holidays, or at least we're not planning to right now. You can find it at authorrev.org/ the Art of Difficult Conversations, or just ADC, authorrev.org/ADC. And we'll be meeting at a time that is accessible to both US and most of the EU. And we hopefully will be running a cohort that will be able to target Asia and Australia again next year. But we won't be able to facilitate this time around unless you want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which we have definitely had people.
Me too.
We also have an on-demand version of that course now, Rich, that I tirelessly worked on. We've had like 300 people through it now this year, called The Art of Difficult Conversations on Demand, for people that can't go out and actually engage with a full day with us over the course of a year, basically in just 3 months. That's a fantastic way to get the learning in. It includes practice exercises. You're welcome to take it with a friend or a partner or a colleague, and gives you all the practice on top of all the methodology, all the framework, a lot of things that I never back into the live course. We just didn't have enough time. I got to really nerd out on and include in the back end, in the on-demand version of the Art of Difficult Conversations. And one thing we didn't touch on for practice, Rich, is that every single week for the last 4 years, we have run Fight Lab. And Fight Lab is a live place where you can come for an hour and a half each week to come role play real conversations, real life scenarios that are sourced in real time from the participants, and then we play them out in role play in real time, and we switch positions to look at the situation. And we've trained coaches that run this. We've also trained coaches to take this specific model of this community practice out into their own worlds, their own lives, their own position, and use them inside of their companies and use them inside of their professions, so that they can have doctors meet and do this thing, or they can have salespeople meet and do this thing. But it gives you a place to actually build different approaches to these different conversations in real time and allow yourself to be affected. When we set up role plays in class, we don't always really hit that thing. I cannot tell you how many times I've run a Fight Lab where like we are screaming and we are crying, and it does not feel like hippie shit at all, Rich. It is very real, the emotions that we can engender when we step into the roles. And we've really trained our facilitators to pull people into the live psychodrama aspect of role play, as opposed to it just being like theatrical. We're really playing out a psychodrama here. And it's a deeply powerful practice. And I welcome you, and I welcome your cohort to show up. It is free to the public, it's donation based, and it's a community practice that we just want to give to the world. So
that's
you're
awesome.
Welcome there as well. You can find that authorrev.org/fightlab, or in our conflict page, or on the ADC page.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I can definitely send our cohort that way. As for my one, the FightWise Family Holiday Edition starts October 28th. So it's only 2 weeks instead of your 8-week program. We do 2 sessions per week. So it's a more like compressed, high intensity, let's get it done. And obviously we've timed it so that people can get prepped for Thanksgiving. This is the big focus this time around. It's like, how are you going to show up for Uncle Bob? What conversation you want to have with your dad that you didn't feel like you could have before? Honestly, that's been the thing I've been most proud of, is getting messages from past students saying, I fundamentally transformed my relationship with my dad because the skills I learned in your course. That's the good stuff. That is the good stuff. So that's what we're going to be focused on in this round. Do you want to mention anything you're proud of?
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, Rich, like so many times in this conversation, I'm going to have to follow you in. That is the thing I'm most proud of. It's the reason that I do now. I've had messages from people that have had end of life conversations with their parents that have been refusing to have them for years. I've had people that have had conversations with their partners and absolutely transformed a relationship that has been borderline abusive for years. I have had people go to their bosses and negotiate raises that they have been looking for months or for years, or leave positions that they realized that there was a ceiling to after they had the honest conversation with their boss. I can't tell you how many lives have been transformed. And it's not just my course, right? I'm not even making that claimancy. The claimancy that I'm making and the thing that I feel proud of is my advocacy for doing this work and the impact that focusing on learning how to better engage and increase your optionality in conflict has. That's what I'm proud of, is my advocacy. The course too, but just watching the impact. It's beautiful to be at this table with you doing this. People doing it, man.
Yeah, it's good to meet another cousin from across the pond.
Yeah,
maybe we'll meet over the family dinner sometime.
That'd be fun. Where are you based?
I'm currently in Barcelona. We've just opened our retreat center, Casa Tilo, out here, where we will be eventually running a live FightWise training, I'm sure. We'll schedule that for sometime next year. But yeah, this is the new place that we've just opened that's going to be running lots of different workshops, retreats, co-living periods, fight clubs. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. I'd love to come visit.
Yeah, awesome.
Cheers, mate.
Well, it's been a great pleasure. Signing off.
Same. Thanks for having me on.